Now I'd like to introduce our first presenter. His name is Richard Taylor II. He's a filmmaker and visual artist with an extensive background directing live action, animation, as well as production design, special effects, and CGI for motion pictures and gaming, commercials, television, computer games, special venues. Richard's an active member of the DGA and the Visual Effects Society. His distinguished credits include work on features such as Tron, Star Trek the Motion Picture, Shrek 4. Gaming credits include work on some of the titles in the Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth, and Command and Conquer, Kane's Wrath, and Red Alert, among many, many others. So please join me in welcoming Richard Taylor. So glad.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming this morning. From my side of town, I had to avoid the space shuttle booster, and it kind of slowed us down a little bit. But thank you all for coming. And today I'm going to try and give you a broad sweep through everything that's moving in VR. First of all, VR itself is a word kind of like hologram that gets thrown around a lot, and it has a lot of meanings to a lot of different people. Let me ask right now, how many people here have had on a VR headset of some form? Good. How many have had on a Oculus, a Gear, the Vive, Cardboard? Okay, good. Well, that's a pretty good cross-section. So you all have had some experience at looking at one of the imagery on one of these headsets. I mean, VR is a technology that, just for those of you to kind of define it, what is VR? It's putting you in an environment that's totally surrounds you, and it surrounds you not only visually, but it surrounds you with three-dimensional sound as well. And the formats by which one can view that, right now, the generalized view of all that is the headset world. So the first part of this talk, I'm going to kind of focus on that scale, and then after intermission and after Stuart and you guys get a chance to take a look at the Ozo and get some hands-on experience with that, the second half I'm going to talk about kind of the work that I've been pushing toward, and that is theatrical scale VR, not headset stuff, but where we sit in an environment where that three-dimensionality is immersive, it is around you. So in a sense, VR is what in Star Trek was called the holodeck. It's, you know, putting you in an environment that's believable, but the range of imagery, of media that can be created within inside that world can vary. And obviously, Mark Zuckerberg would not have spent, $2 billion to buy Oculus if he didn't believe that it was the next entertainment format and the most, advanced communication phenomena evolving. As it's been projected, within the next 4 to 5 years, it could be a $150 billion industry. But the variety of media that can be in there, that can be experienced in VR, there's entertainment, games, education, journalism, healthcare, criminal justice, architecture, engineering, design. All those kind of fields can use this technology. BMW for years has had a three-dimensional environment where they look at the development of their models, their cars. And so it is a really evolving technology, and one of the things about all artistic formats is that you need to get into a dance with them for them to teach you something. You need to take this Ozo camera and work with it, because every time you create something, whether you're a painter, a writer, an architect, you have to put energy into your process daily, get into a dance with it for you to teach you something. And we usually learn from mistakes, but those mistakes become brilliant ideas a year later. So you have to really get hands-on with this. So the imagery that can be created for the VR world can be done with entirely computer simulation. It can be done, I'm going to move ahead here. It can be done by shooting live plates of different formats, and therefore any combination that we all use when we are working in the special effects industry and the film industry today. So first of all, I want to remind everybody that Stuart English is here, and he's like the world expert on this camera system. And Miles Heckendorn is here, who's the tech who I've been able to work with a little bit in the presentation we did earlier about 3 or 4 weeks ago at Birns Sawyer. So there we are. That's the VR world as most people know it, wearing a headset. And I'm not one to mix words about the elephant in the room. There are things about this level of imaging that it has great potential, but there are some limitations to it at this point. Any format, whether it's a VR, anything, it's going to keep evolving. It's never going to get worse than it is. It's going to get better and better. So the resolution and all of that is going to progressively move forward as people become more familiar with it, and companies like Nokia keep putting their technology into evolving it. So headsets are primarily the general use or the place that people see VR right now. And as I said later, I'm going to talk about some other venues that are evolving. So let me see here. So part of what I have been working with for about the last 6 years is creating imagery that takes place in a 3-space world. This little example here should, I believe, give you an idea of, that's what you see when you go to a theater and you see 3D. You see a flat plane in front of you that's surrounded by a rectangle. But in VR and in the spatial world, it can take different formats. You could build a pano around a person using projection and edge blend those together. You can create a hemisphere and an upward-facing dome like a planetarium. That was kind of used in the Marvel experience, not very successfully, by the way. And if you roll that sphere forward, you have what many people, how many people have seen Omnimax? Well, that was the format they had it in. But if you roll that sphere entirely forward and wrap it around you, now you have a world that surrounds you. With the VR headsets, what is happening that is different is that unlike sitting in this room with this dimensionality around you, you do have a headset on. That means you're isolated, you're by yourself, you're listening to the sound dimensionally, but you are, I mean, the word immersive gets used with VR a lot, and I have a debate about that. So the VR experience with headsets on is that you are looking through a window at that world. There's a world around you, but you don't know it's there unless you look around. And if you go to a VR film festival or any VR experience where you have a bunch of PVC people sitting in individual chairs, you know, looking like this, and some people put them on and they don't even realize, you say, look around, and they go, oh, yes, and they look around and realize that there's a world around it. So you're in that dimensional world, but you're looking at it through a window. It's like being in that world with a camera, but it has three-dimensionality to it. There are other general limitations to what the VR world is now, and it's going to be a while before it really evolves into the next generation of that, and that being that just like the Samsung Gear, you basically, the resolution of what is on your cell phone, the highest end ones right now are 4K, and in maybe 5 to 10 years, it could possibly go up to 6 or 8K. But when you have a screen that's literally this far away from your eyes, that resolution has to become microscopic for it to become photoreal. So, you know, when you have lemons, make lemonade. And we now are seeing a lot of really great VR being created by the companies like Weaver and Versa and, you know, some of the major production companies are starting to evolve into VR. But there is a particular resolution that you're looking at in there. And if it's 4K resolution, that 4K is wrapped around you 360 degrees. So you're looking at a percentage of 4K. And so the contrast, the blacks are not black and the whites are not white, and you do see the pixels. But if you create content for that, when you design anything, when you design a building or you create a film, you design for what the media is that you're working with. So things that are very graphic work really well in there, games work really well in there, and now with a camera system like this, we're starting to see the interface of plates that are shot on location. There are a lot of cameras out there, and most of them are, in a sense, to me, jury rigs in a way. A lot of them use the GoPro, but the GoPro does not have a spherical shutter. It has a sweeping shutter, and a lot of people have designed units, the 360 group, for example, where you configure them in different ways. Some people are using the Black Magic. So there are other conforming, but none of them are like this. The wonderful thing about this Ozo camera is that it is at a place like Birns Sawyer and other distributors where you can go rent it and go out and shoot with it. And I predict that most film schools will have one of these, and most film schools are starting to evolve a VR program, because there's a lot that I'm going to talk about how to tell stories in this dimensional world. So, but we know that we have resolution and contrast, and again, you're looking through a window. To create a headset where, when you put it on, it wraps around you and you look around with your eyes, and that it is immersive and around you, is going to be 10 years or more away, and maybe even farther than that. So to get that resolution and to get that wraparound happening is very complicated technically. So for the last 6 years, I've been working on projects. This piece right here was, let me lay this here. This was done a year before Tron Legacy came out. All right, so this was done several years ago, and you can see it's a spherical format because I was working in a pneumatic spherical dome, and this was created because Disney came to me and asked if I could help design a standalone environment for Comic-Con to market the Tron Legacy. And I started looking at domes and then discovered that there was the potential to make three-dimensional imagery with inside a dome. So this was a piece that I did for that. And the dome never got made. Disney couldn't pull the trigger, and so it never really got made. But it's what first got me involved in three-space imaging. The name of my new company is called 3Space, 3Space representing X, Y, and Z. So everything you see in there is up, down, left, right. It totally surrounds you. But the same concepts that are being used here as far as designing something for a spherical world applies absolutely to all headset imaging. It's just that instead of it being here to look around, you are looking at it through that window. So here's a piece that I did about 2 years ago that was created for an amusement park that's still in the works. And it's the Red Sea Astrarium. And it is a piece that features the park. The design of the park was based on time travel, which is a real good idea for a park. Real great idea because you can do so many types of things with time travel. But in this particular case, you're seeing the Astrarium clock, which is a clock that I designed, and you'll see Da Vinci on it. And what you're going to see here appears around you in a three-dimensional way, and this same imagery could be converted and played on a VR headset. So all the particulates there, the stuff floating through the air, that stuff is all drifting by you, and this clock is forming. Now, if you'll notice right now, this is a sphere that's around you, but that clock is coming up toward you, generally in front of you, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about here is the way you compose imagery, the way you design for this three-space environment. So there's Galileo down here. Where is he? Well, you can see Galileo there. He's orchestrating the planets. So what that shows you right there is that the world of shooting and or designing imagery for a three-dimensional world is entirely different than anything that's theatrical, rectangular. You have a world around you. And people who've gone out, like the guys at Hunter Gratzner, who made a couple of films and so forth in this three-dimensional world, they found out exactly what I'm talking about here. And that is, first of all, that when you're talking about a three-dimensional world around you, forget about traditional ways of framing things that you have for cinema. You're in a three-dimensional world, so you need to think more like theater in the round or theatrically. When you go to see a play or a musical, the way things are brought to you and from you, and especially if you see something at Theater in the Round or a show like Love, the Cirque du Soleil show, which is a show that basically has things coming and going around you, the composition is entirely different than anything that you shoot on a set or on a location. Those of us who, I've directed hundreds of commercials, as you know, there's a firewall here with our camera, and we know what the shot's going to be, whether you're using a crane or a dolly or whatever it is. You basically know what the shot is, but if you look 180 degrees, there's craft services and grip trucks and everything back there. Well, when you're working in a three-dimensional world, that all has to go away. You're seeing all that, and you're seeing the shadow of the drone that your camera is on. You're seeing everything. That's a difficult problem when you're out shooting with a real thing in a location. You have to hide all that. Or you compose the shot so that that material is going to be covered or replaced. So you need to think of it theatrically. The composition in any form of storytelling, the director decides where we want you to look. Okay, when I'm in a three-dimensional world here, and I have someone here standing in front of me talking, and there's a dialogue going on, the last place that I want to go from him talking to me or talking to the person he's talking to is back here. You don't carry on conversations by looking here and then turning around to see this here. You can go left and right, but you don't go from front to back. And so the composition of where you want the attention to be, that's why you saw in that piece that Astrarium clock, if you're sitting in that dome, it's right there in front of you. And the ambience of it, looking around, that all works great. But it just helps you to be there. And again, when you're looking at that world through a window, you need to keep that in mind at all times. Where do I want the audience to look? So that composition is really important. Another really different thing about working in this three-dimensional world is that the way the camera moves or camera movement itself. First of all, here's this Ozo sitting here on a tripod. It is seeing everything here. And you can tell stories where it just sits there and things come to it and from it and move around it. The minute you start to move that camera, you are taking the subject matter and moving through that world. Now, if there is a story or logical reason to do that, that makes great sense. But you have to be very careful about the speed at which you move, the amount of pan, the amount of tilt, the amount of roll is very much different than when you're looking at something through a rectangle. And there are a lot of little simple examples of that. For example, a close-up in traditional filmmaking, I can just cut in too tight on me. A close-up in this world is you being close to me. Otherwise, you're a giant head, and that's not the same thing at all. A giant head might be good in a dream sequence, but it isn't like being in reality. And one of the things that I'm working toward doing in the work that I'm working on is trying to create photoreal human beings. And we all know how to do that now. Ask Paul Walker, who was in 266 scenes in Fast and Furious 7, and you can't tell one from the other, and it doesn't matter how close or far away you are. Since Benjamin Button, we have been able to make photoreal human beings. So we can make them in this virtual world, but they, if you're going to believe that they're real, they need to be real human scale. So there are other aspects of that, as I just mentioned about a close-up. One of the things with three-dimensional cameras, or three-space cameras, is how close an object can come to that camera. The farther apart the lenses, the more difficult it is to bring things closer. A beautiful part of the design of this camera is that it's 9 inches, it's about the size of a human head, and they have designed it so that those lenses are literally the distance apart of the human eye. And on that equatorial plane there in the middle, there are 4 cameras. Altogether, there are 8. Those 4 cameras in the middle each have a 195-degree angle of view, and they overlap each other by 50%. This is shooting in stereo. And another lovely thing about this camera is that it has a way of blending those cameras together in real time when you're shooting, so you can have a headset on and literally see what you're shooting. You don't have to take it all to post and stitch it together there. And it's giving you 8 discrete channels of imagery that you can then take into post. And in the brochures that you have, there's a list of post software, and the Nokia has its own software, and the Foundry and other people like that have some incredible programs that allow you to take imagery in from a range of three-space cameras and stitch them together. To make a perfect stitch in a three-dimensional world is very difficult. It's almost an impossible thing to do when you really think about it. And one of the most important parts of that is having the cameras in perfect sync with each other and having the right kind of shutter and so forth. That's one of the problems with all the three-dimensional cameras that have GoPros. They don't have the proper shutter. So this camera gives you 8 discrete channels that you can then take into post and really stitch them together and get the stereo pairs, the left and right eye, and then take them into Nuke and start to add elements if you wish, or just use what it is that you shot. You know, where we're going with all this, of course, is the mixture. That's what I'm really interested in, is going out and shooting plates and then taking that into post and adding, you know, a dinosaur or a robot or whatever it is that you want to do. And you can, with a camera like this, shoot elements at different levels. So you could shoot something against green, you could shoot a background plate, so you can shoot foreground, midground, and background elements. And anytime you're dealing with three-dimensionality, even in traditional filmmaking, you want to get as much depth in the scene as you can. That's why in that piece you just saw, which was, you know, that object in space, I made all those particulates drifting by and so forth to give you dimensionality. Let's see what we got here. So here's a piece that I created, working toward a project eventually to be at the Masters tournament. That this is a totally computer simulated golf course. It's actually 2 holes from Spyglass Golf Course that we remodeled, and it's to real scale. And I renamed it, you know, Deer Creek. But the camera's flying through here, and if you watch how I choreographed the camera here, again, where the focus is is right here in the middle of in the foreground. There's my, so that golfer, for example, is the focus of that scene. And he was done with mocap and composited in here. Just 1 second. Looking for my laser pointer here. So part of what I take into account here is how fast I can rotate, how fast I can swing around without, because first of all, whenever you have a dimensional world around you, especially one that's like being in this room, your inner ear, your eye, it really affects you. And I've seen from some of the tests that I've done, it actually affects women more than it does men. When I take people into this smaller dome and they, some people come out, oh my God, I felt like, I was gonna fall over, or it can make you dizzy, or, but in this particular case, so I add things in a shot like this. For example, these birds that come by you, those are dimensional things, and this is only, it's not even 50% of the way to photoreal as far as recreating this golf course. There'd be particulates in the air, leaves blowing through the air, it's all too perfect. Leaves tumbling across the course and so forth. But again, how I design the move there, I don't move too fast. I keep, first of all, you can move on the Z-axis all you really want to. That never really affects people. But the minute you pan or tilt or roll, that's when it affects your sense of stability and makes one feel uncomfortable. Let's see what we got here. See what we got. Here's another piece that I did I did as a spec piece to show Red Bull for and again, you see all these particulates floating at you, but there's the focus right there. It's in the front of you here. We look at this world horizontally. We look out in front of us. We don't look at the world like a planetarium. We don't look down. We tell stories. In this plane, we look out here. Yes, we look left and right, and this all contributes to the ambience of where we are, and our eyes know that. But if you go into a three-dimensional world like this, can you cut? If we're sitting here right now, and all of a sudden I was able to click a switch, and now we're all on a street corner in Paris, our eyes and our minds are not designed to do that. So if you're in a dimensional world and all of a sudden you just cut and the perspective changes, the interocular distance changes, or the perspective changes at all, if we did that to you, you would think you're crazy. The only people that see the world like that are schizophrenics. So it's a really important thing how you make transitions. Again, that's why I say you have to think theatrically. You have to think in terms of taking the light away and bringing it up, bringing things to you, turning to see them. That's why it's really great if you're going to work in this medium to go see plays and musicals and see real theatrical things in the real world, other than movies. So you need to continually think about, if I'm going to go out and shoot with this, or I'm going to create a world that's entirely CG, whether it's an animated stylization or whether it's something photoreal, you have to think in this other way. In this kind of three-dimensional world, you can do dissolves, long dissolves, that works. But again, just cutting like that. And you could cut if that was, if you were doing it for a dramatic purpose, but it's really quite different when you cut a three-dimensional world. There's a little more forgiveness with headset stuff because, again, you're really seeing only a percentage of that world. But when the whole world around you, and it just clicks and changes, that's an entirely different thing. This is a piece I did for a pano. So this was a 180-degree pano. There's a cylinder that is 12 feet high and 6 meters in diameter. And this is for a proposal that a company I was working for, RGH Entertainment, for a museum that was going to be built in Saudi Arabia, a family museum. And so I created this piece. The whole piece is like 9 minutes long or something. This is just some sections from it. But I used the falcon as the kind of follow the bouncing ball to lead you through this world. And, but again, where is the camera focus? Where is the point of view that you're looking? And again, this was all three-dimensional, so it's three-dimensional around you, but a 180-degree pano. So here, for example, are the constellations, and of course that's all three-dimensional and floating in front of you. And then here I gently drop down into this boat. This is what would be in the museum. There would be an actual boat, and you could hold iPads like that and look at the sky and see, you know, the constellations and where you are. Here, this book is floating. That falcon right there comes right out and right past you. You could, you know, when I show this to people, like kids and things, they want to reach out and touch it. And by the way, whenever you get people doing that, you know you're pretty successful. So this compass, for example, drifts right out. Now this is another piece that I was designing for a project called Wonders, which is going to be a virtual tour of the ancient wonders of the world, and you're theoretically flying on an airplane like that. In this particular venue, it was going to be the I-Ride system, similar to the Soaring California ride. And now there's Soaring Canada and all these others. But basically, you are floating in front of a big hyperbolic screen on a mover that has tilt and has tilt and a little bit of roll. Now you're going to see some pieces here that are in previs kind of resolution. Obviously these people and so forth are standing in to represent this, and this whole tour through the wonders of the world, I'm just cutting in little sequences here to give you an idea of the kind of perspectives and things you could do. But right here, we go up here and we would see, this is Chichen Itza, and you would see the king and his entourage there. Now this little move right here, when this camera turns left and dives down like that, I had that at different speeds, and there's a lot of people go, oh, you know, as soon as that camera would dive down and start to move across there. This is the lighthouse of Alexandria. Again, this is previs resolution. This is by no means anything close to a finished product. And you know, that's one of the wonderful things in our industry is we do have previs now. And as you all know who work in the film industry, just how much money and time that saves, and how you can figure out whether an idea really works or not. So here we are at Machu Picchu, and then intentionally I come out over that cliff so it drops off and you get that Omnimax feeling of, oh, you know, that your stomach kind of drops away. So again, this is all just previs resolution. This project is on hold right now, and hopefully it'll evolve. It's definitely something that should be done, and it's something that could be done with CG, and in certain cases you could go to Machu Picchu here and shoot certain elements with the Ozo. So, and I kind of bookended this with the Falcon coming back to the Falconeer. The world of VR is going to keep evolving, and as I said, I'm going to talk a little later about larger formats. But you know, the lucky thing is that we do have this Ozo camera now, and I just find it wonderful that now there is a camera that's out there that anybody can use, and you can go rent them or buy them, or however you want to get your hands on them, but they work, and they work really well, and Nokia will continue to develop them. They shoot at 30 frames a second, and each one of those cameras right there is a 2K camera, so basically when you overlap them and wrap around you on the equatorial plane, that's 4K that's around you. So it's 4K this way and 4K this way. And this camera was designed for the headset world. And there are other camera systems out there that are working toward, you know, higher resolution and higher frame rates, and I'm sure Nokia is doing the same. So I'm going to end right here and call this the end of the first half of my presentation.